Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to start off with a simple question and just raise your hand. All of you familiar with the concept in finance of present value? I figured so. Since I've been here, no one understands that in this institution. That is why we borrow aggressively for the latest and greatest political idea that you think might parlay into a solution. And of course, if you understand present value, you know the significance, especially when interest rates are high, of whatever you spend in the moment. And to get that justified, you're going to have something in the future that is huge in consequence in terms of that return on investment, or to justify why you'd want to spend and borrow the money in the present. It'd be different, too, if we were dealing with capital, equity. We have no equity here. We borrow now 30 cents on every dollar we spend. Just 5 years ago, that was 20 cents. I think you all understand how that cost of capital is going to really go up when you start pricing in the 5% that interest rates have gone up in the last year and a half. I won't insult you with what is 1%. I'll even make it easy, 30 trillion. Take 5% of that and then start applying it to 42 trillion that our fearless leader has us in debt in 5 years, 52 trillion in 9 to 10 years. That's a calamity that will far swamp anything that we've been talking about here. And I'm a conservative that believes we need to be in the discussion of climate. I think if not, you're at least not going to be in a position where you have credibility to offer other things to do. But in light of that, and the fact that the biggest economies other than ours in the world, outside of the EU, and that's a collective group that seems to have trouble getting things in agreement, they're building coal-fired plants weekly in India and in China. So the fact that we've got something that to me is worth discussing, the physics and chemistry, you put greenhouse gases into the air, and I think it warms things up. But the modeling, that having an accurate sense of present value analysis, we've been off the mark for 20 years. So that means the disproportionate part of the equation is all the money you're spending and borrowing in the present when we've not knocked anything out of the park. So I think my point would be maybe we ought to get back to budgeting. The fact that we haven't done that in 20-some years makes this very much an academic discussion. It means we're talking about something that we know might occur, but there's been almost zero credibility on plugging in the benefits that would accrue from spending and borrowing all this money. I'd like, again, a show of hands. Do you think that makes sense, what I've just said? I see 4 out of 5 think you do. That is better than most on a panel. So I guess my point is, let's redirect the essence of the Budget Committee to doing what you're supposed to do. The other issues are ancillary, and especially when we've been so long on this idea of trying to find out what actually the consequence is. To me, we've given up our energy independence. We've done so many things that tilt the whole analysis, which finance pays the bills. Government, just because you got the printing press in the basement and your credit card gets renewed every year, you can't be borrowing now $1 trillion every 6 months. I do think we need to be engaged in the conversation, but I think we're going to have other issues much more serious than what might occur that we've not modeled very well. And the only way you can have credibility of putting that much emphasis on it now is if you can tell us there's a tipping point fairly soon down the road, or else we're just going to borrow and spend ourselves into a place that'll be a lot worse than where the economy might go, supply chain and all that, due to climate. I'd like Mr. McNally to comment on it, and Dr. Rose. Let's start with Mr. McNally.
Thank you, Senator. My clients asked me to predict what policymakers will do. And one reason why we predict there will not be sufficient action to achieve net zero is we look exactly at the problem you're describing. The budget problems of our country could be solved, as I understand it, in a couple weeks of legislative time. They could be understood by an 11-year-old with decent math skills, and it would not require getting China on board or anything else. If, solving global warming, a global central planning exercise, is climbing Mount Everest, fixing the problems you just described is a walk in Shenandoah, the Skyline Drive. Much easier to do mechanically, yet we can't do that. It's very difficult, as you know, you and your colleagues know better than me. It involves hard choices, but it's much more doable than achieving net zero. It's one reason why I'm cautious when advising investors about how much real action to expect on the climate front.
Dr. Rose.
Well, I'm going to show my age. I started working on environmental problems 50 years ago and interviewing businesses about how they were going to cope with air pollution control. And many of them told me it was going to bankrupt them, and we've found over the years that businesses rally. When they're faced with regulation and cost, they find ways to meet those challenges with innovation and different ways of doing things, and we found those innovations paid dividends over and over again. So the projected costs that I think you've cited are exaggerated. You've underestimated the benefits that most scientists believe we're going to receive by reducing climate change. There are tipping points. The scientific community is universally agreed that 2 degrees centigrade increase in temperatures, average temperatures from the Industrial Revolution base is as far as we need to go, and many of them don't think we should go past 1.5
So do you think the modeling has been good to date? Or
yes. Yes, the climate modeling has been. So there have been people who have been cited. Senator Johnson mentioned 189 people signed a document led by 2 physicists. Well, physicists aren't climatologists. So I could cite 18,000 scientists that would say climate change is a serious problem.
Thank you.